Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Rabbi Eric Walker. Modern science has popularized a view of the cosmos that suggests there is no need for God and denies any evidence of his existence. It views the stars as the random result of an evolutionary process rather than a testament of the Creator's glory. The Story of the Cosmos, a new book, provides a different and fascinating perspective. It points to a God who makes himself known in the wonder and beauty of his creation. This compilation from over a dozen respected scholars and experts includes Dr. William Lane Craig, Guillermo Gonzalez, Melissa Cain Travis, and Dr. Michael Ward. It's formatted into three parts: exploration of the cosmos, expressions of the cosmos in art and literature, and evidences pointing to the creation of the cosmos. General editors Paul Gould and Daniel Ray have included essays that span a range of topics and interests. The readers will discover a deeper look at the universe and explore the traces of God's glory in the latest discoveries of astronomy, science, literature, and art. Our next guest, Paul Gould, teaches philosophy and apologetics at Oklahoma Baptist University and is the founder and president of Two Tasks Institute. He is the editor or author of several books, including Cultural Apologetics, published by Zondervan. Paul blogs at paul-gould.com, here to discuss the story of the cosmos, how the heavens declare the glory of God, is co-editor and contributor Paul Gould. Paul, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to be here today.
Well, it's great to have you. This is, not only is this a beautifully written, elegant prose testifying to the sovereignty of a singular creator who has created what we call the cosmos in such a profound, irrefutable, indisputable way, and told us in the most supernatural document ever discovered by man, which predates Jesus, predates by 300 or 400 years Christianity, and it solidifies the Jewish thought of the 33 scriptures in Genesis that talk about the 6 days of creation, and confirms that all of this was done. It is stunning, and I think the book is elegant. I compliment you on not only its scholarly content, because it is at a it's not at a the highest of highs, but it's to the intellectual appeal of somebody who wants to know. It is for those who are challenged by the question, seeking the answer, and want to stand firm as a cosmos apologist, or as you call a philosopher. And so I'm delighted to hear, and I don't do this with other guests, and you are, I think, guest number about 1,500 on this program. I actually listened to several of your other interviews. I've not done that before because I wanted to get to know you a little bit, and I wanted to get to know your style. Was I dealing with Carl Sagan? Was I dealing with somebody who doesn't read the same scientific information I read, which just came out with stunning statements that all mankind descended from one genetic pair, one man and one woman, that 90% of all animals appeared on Earth at the exact same moment, mitochondrial DNA. That Sodom and Gomorrah were actually destroyed by a cosmological heavenly event that could have only occurred in a certain way, in a certain fashion, the elements contributing to its destruction could only have come from heaven. These are new reports just in the last 90 days in the scientific journals. So something sterling, something dynamic is happening. You're right there with your hand on the pulse. Here you are, a Jewish guy at a Baptist university. What's up with that, and what's up with this renewal of the story of the cosmos and the majesty of God?
Yeah, those are two great questions. Let me tell you a story about each. We were talking just before we went on live here about the fact that I am Jewish, but what I didn't have a chance to tell you is how I found out that I was Jewish. So it's kind of a fun story here. So the backstory is this. So my father, my grandfather's name was Gould, and I knew him as an actor in Hollywood for a number of years. He did TV, acted on vaudeville with Mae West in the 30s and 40s, and things like this. So when he died about 15 years ago, I was in my late 20s. This is the part I didn't share with you. I was in my late 20s, and I'm looking through all of his paperwork and his awards and paraphernalia, and that's when I discovered his birth certificate. So you can imagine, I'm in my late 20s. I have always and only known him as Val Gould, and I find his birth certificate, and the name I find on there is Zelig Goldfader. So you can imagine my shock, because I asked my dad, why does Grandpa have this name on his birth certificate? That's actually when I found out that he was 100% Jewish, that his family emigrated from Russia in the early 1910 to America, and then eventually he runs away to Hollywood and changes his name in the 30s because of all the anti-Semitism. So I actually didn't know, and my experience of growing up wasn't with the knowledge that I'm actually Jewish. So it was actually something that I learned later in life. And then in terms of what's going on with science and the story of the cosmos, there it's interesting too, because the modern intelligentsia, let's just say, the reality police tell us this story, and the story is that there's nothing beyond this world. All that exists is matter. And the picture of the universe that they give us is quite boring, actually, and it's quite lonely. And of course, we as humans are significant, happy, lucky creatures that just happen to appear for a finite time. But what's interesting is that story just doesn't satisfy. And so there's all this pushback, not just from scientists and philosophers. I'm a philosopher, but I think from the longings of the human heart that there must be more to this world. There must be more to this universe. And so this book, The Story of the Cosmos, in many ways is almost a response to Carl Sagan's 1980, wildly popular Cosmos, where he begins that whole story with, the cosmos or the universe is all that ever was or is or ever will be. And then you have the reboot of that over the last couple of years with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Both of those incredibly influential, but they're just telling a bad story, and they're telling the wrong story, the false story of the world. And so what we want to do here is show, no, actually science and philosophy and art, everything points to a completely different story, and it happens to be the true story of the world, and it's a story where God is, active and care in the lives of humans, and has actually come within the universe and so on. So that's what's going on.
In 2015, I released a book called The Codist. It was a discovery based on a discovery that was made that there is a genetic marker within the DNA to determine whether or not you are of the line of Aaron. And I began to ponder all this rise in DNA testing and what would have happened if Adolf Hitler had a database of all the Jewish people. And it really vexed my spirit that we were going down this route of collecting everybody's DNA. What were they going to do with it? What if there was a way to weaponize DNA? So I began a journey around the world to find out that, in fact, there are many countries, including America, that were directly involved in the weaponization of DNA, in creating viruses which would specifically attack a genetic marker, and thinking that, okay, As a Jewish believer, Jesus made the statement before he left that he's not coming back until the Jews call for his return. That would be the Sanhedrin. If you kill off the line of Aaron, there's no high priest, and then so there's nobody to call for Jesus' return. Would this be a diabolical plot line? Well, I began to do the research and found out so much about studying genetics and the helix, just the basic RNA, DNA compilation of what's contained in this DNA, realizing that in creation, we share with all living things approximately 95% of all chemistry in common. RNA, DNA, carbon, all these elements, all created that happen to be all contained in dirt. So my first real scientific, and I'm not a scientific guy, right? I'm actually a marketing guy that came out of corporate marketing America. My first concept and construct for having not faith value of the story of creation, but having traveled to geneticists and sitting down with these brilliant minds and looking in microscopes and looking in what are they called, mass spectrometers, and looking at things that boggle the mind, that I saw as creative works of art. I saw them as something that I would go to a museum to look at these pictures on a wall, because they weren't science to me, because I'm not a scientist. So I didn't have the clinical mind. I had and so I was blown away by this incredible DNA component. Then I look at the cosmos, and the cosmos is similarly configured. You reference the revolutions, as elliptical or as an egg. Your example was cutting an egg in half, and the yolk being the Earth, and the odd-shaped elliptical shape of the white part of the egg being the orbit. Okay, and I thought that was a very critical example for the mind that doesn't embrace the algorithmic explanation and all the quotients. But we have compounded this because of man-made science. This has been my argument for a long time. Okay, you talked to me about carbon dating. Man created carbon dating. God didn't create carbon dating. So where do you get your first step one? Where do you get your baseline? You have to make it up. Man has to create the baseline for carbon dating, because God did not create the baseline for carbon dating. So when we look at the cosmos, we have to have a man-made narrative that we have to create, we have to fabricate to refute the God-given narrative, where He does give us the baseline. He does establish that He alone. Now, we mentioned Carl Sagan. He uses the term billions and billions. Okay? Billions is a word that's thrown around a lot. Now, in the Jewish world, we look at a timeline where we're young Earth. The Jewish mindset is a young Earth mindset, that we're less than 6,000 years old. What is the cosmos view? Because, see, the Bible begins, it says, in the beginning. And then you have to debate the question, well, when was the beginning? That's kind of like the starting point of the Q&A. All right? The Bible starts out in the beginning, so then you have to say, okay, when was the beginning? Could the beginning have been 1 billion years ago? Do we have any knowledge? Do we have any way to even understand or comprehend or pinpoint a way to determine that?
Yeah. So are you asking what is the book's view on that, or just what is the cosmos telling us, or a little of both?
Oh, you're a philosopher. Okay, I ask my idea is I ask you a question, and you are going
Yeah.
to Aristotle me.
All right. Yeah. Well, philosophers love to make distinctions. I was looking for the distinction. Yeah. So in the book, we don't take a view on that question. We've got scientists, philosophers, artists that are actually on all sides of this view. You know this. There's a debate, and it's sort of an in-house debate among believers. What is the age of the Earth? And so we kind of don't touch that. I think the big idea, and this is the thing that isn't up for debate, is what you just said, that the universe began a finite time ago. And what's so interesting about that question is that the science confirms that without a doubt. We can quibble about, it's a fairly large quibble about the dating of that. But we look at examples of the fact that the universe is expanding, and as we look out at the night sky, the stars are moving away from us because they shift to the red end of the spectrum, which tells us that the light source is moving away. And that was a key discovery that took place in the 1920s by Edwin Hubble. And what that did, though, was prior to 1917, but everybody thought the universe was eternal except for the theists, right? And this was the story that science was telling us. But now the story is that science tells us is quite different. No, the universe began a finite time ago, and so many of these scientists that don't believe in God are really struggling with what do we do with that? What do we do if the universe is expanding? Well, then we can go back in time to an origin event. And of course, we read Genesis 1:1, and it says, "In the beginning created the heavens and the earth." And to me, that's very much exactly what science confirms. So that's kind of where we keep it in the book, because there is such an in-house debate on that. And I think that's the big takeaway, that at least, we can debate the finer points, but the big takeaway is, wow, we have not been here forever, and that requires an explanation. And of course, theism, Christian theism, I would argue, gives the best explanation for the origin event of the universe.
And I am in complete agreement. I think that we want to believe that this report that came back from Mars, the media said life found on Mars. A single cell microbe was found on Mars. And they determined that to be life. When we look at the scriptures, there's a word in Genesis 1 for create. It's called bara, B-A-R-A, bara, which is an attribute of God. Man cannot create. We cannot take nothing and make something out of it. There's the old story about the man that says, well, look, I created life in a test tube. And God said, well, what did you do? And he said, well, I took oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen, and I took carbon. He said, okay, now start over again, but now with your own elements.
That's good.
So we can't create the elements. So the elements were somehow here. And the elements are, as we went to the moon, we studied the surface of the moon, and lo and behold, what do we find? We find a certain commonality of elements, meaning that there is, if I'm, I don't know what the distance, I forget.
225,000 miles to the moon, yeah.
Okay, 225,000 miles away, distinct parts, okay, comprised of the same elements, would indicate that the paintings, okay, are by the same painter.
Yeah. And you can expand it all the way to the current edge of the universe, and what you find are, like you said, the same elements. I mean, they're in stars, they're in there's planets out there, but it's all made by, and this is what's so interesting. I was thinking about this, some of the interviews that I've been doing on the book. I was talking to someone the other day about black holes, and I was thinking about this of that. And then I was just thinking about what can we learn about God through that. And, black holes and the fact that the universe is, as scientists tells us, 100 billion galaxies, each with 100 billion stars. The immensity of the universe is amazing. It's mind-boggling, yet it's knowable. And I was thinking about this. In theology, we talk about the immensity of God, yet He's knowable. And so you see all these. The universe helps us in a way to understand that tension that we hold as theologians, as humans, trying to understand something like God. But then I was even thinking about the universe itself, like you're saying, the immensity of the universe. We see within that, though, we see unity. We see the same elements. We see the same laws of nature throughout. We see diversity, incredible diversity, especially as you come down to the earth and we see the life here that we have. You see order, which is amazing. You see abundance, and you see beauty. And then you go back to Genesis 1, and what do we read there? Well, we find a God, who exists and sort of bubbling out of His goodness and love. He creates this universe, this great diversity with order, separating the seasons and things like this. There's order, there's boundaries, there's diversity, there's beauty, there's immensity. We see the same things, and so in many ways, I forget which author or contributor made the comment in the book, but in many ways, the cosmos, the universe, reminds us of paradise. And I was thinking about that comment, and I mean, we see the same kinds of characteristics that we see in Genesis 1, we see them writ large. And in some ways, I think it does point us back to our home, and also points us to our future, where when God will make all things new. So the heavens, for those who have ears to hear and eyes to see, they do help us understand, I think, deep theological truths. And that's part of, theologians talk about the two books that God has given us, the book of Scripture and the book of nature. And like Augustine said, that creation is a great book for us to read. And I think that that's an important observation that is helpful for us in understanding, I think, the deep things of God as well.
If we cannot grasp the cosmos as being God's canvas, God's creative power, the beauty of the northern lights, the majesty of even the constellations, and being able to identify and relate, being able to look at the planets, their orbit, their order. Paradise, Gan Eden in the Hebrew, the Garden of Eden, is paradise. This is told to us through Scripture, that we began in Gan Eden and we will return to Gan Eden, to paradise. And when we look at the magnitude, we can then begin to understand how all things were created by this mind. That you have the mind of a philosopher. I have the mind of there's a lot of people who make a living trying to figure that out.
But you're a philosopher too, because you have a mind. But go ahead.
But that's exactly right. I am a philosopher. But as you look at our view of the cosmos, for some reason we want to grab a hold of the sensational as opposed to the supernatural. And this is where a big divide comes, even in the scientific circles, is that the black holes, the wormholes, the universe is on the other side, alien life forms, visitations, those kind of things are the sensational side of it. The supernatural side of it would support everything that you and I are talking about. Wormholes, black holes, that there is endless. It is, and it would not surprise me if in this whole navigation of the cosmos, if it did not return me as I navigated it over eternity, it did not return me right back to the place in which it all began, because that's exactly what God says in the Bible, is that in Genesis 1, okay, in the beginning, God created the heavens plural, so we should be fine and comfortable with the cosmos, because it's defined as a plural. It's not singular. So there's one galaxy that we're a part of. There are many galaxies. It doesn't defy God or defy Scripture by saying heavens, because He says but there is but one earth. And we've looked out there. We're now able to see in places that we've never seen before. We find nothing like the earth in all that we found, and yet there is this denying, this arguing. The book takes you on a really fascinating journey of the three parts. First is the exploration of the cosmos, and the contributors to this all have one word in common in their description, and the word is glorious. Every one of them.
That's right.
And these are not collaborative, and I want to make sure that the audience understands. This is a compilation, a contribution of 13 essays or narratives written by 13 individuals, you being one of them, who give their perspective on a particular area. And the contributors to the first part, 7 contributors who did not collaborate, right, but yet had independent submissions, used the exact same word in all 7 descriptions in the explanation of the cosmos, and the word is glorious. I find that stunning.
I'm always struck with, as one of the couple people in the book, in fact, I just reread the book last week, because, you work on the book, you edit the essays, and then you forget about it as it goes to print. And so this was actually the first time last week when I read it from cover to cover in the order that it's presented. And what I was struck with, actually, there's a couple themes that struck me, but I had never noticed because I'd always read the individual essays, but just about every one of them seemed to quote Psalm 19. And, Psalm 19, as C.S. Lewis says, the greatest psalm in all the psalters, and it begins with David's proclamation that the heavens declare the glory of God and the skies proclaim the work of his hands. And so that word glory, kabod, the heaviness, the weightiness. But this is how God has made us, right? We're made to worship. I love how Augustine, who again is an early church father, of the Christian tradition, who he looks up, he says, we can't help but look up at the heavens and cry out, all is made. And that's I think the natural impulse. And I think that you're right, though, many today look up at the same heavens and they don't cry, all is made, and then are led to worship, because they're living according to a different story, a different narrative, a different imaginative or philosophical view of the world, naturalism, atheism, whatever you want to call it, materialism. But yeah, that's the natural impulse. And so I was struck with that the heavens really do declare the glory. And of course, the glory can mean two things, and it means both, I think, in this case. It can mean the fame, or it can mean the excellence. And I think that the heaven proclaims both about God. It shows the excellence and the beauty of the God who created it all, and it shows, the fame due his name for, creating this beautiful world that we can live and move and have our being, as Paul says. So, yeah.
Without a concept of the true story of the cosmos, how the heavens declare the glory of God, the understanding of seasons, of God setting the stars in the sky according to the courses of their seasons. This is part of Jewish liturgy.
That's right.
This is part of the liturgical declarations made as a part of Jewish liturgy, and have been for millennia, in declaring that God sent, as he did, the luminaries to be signs, and for the setting of signs and seasons and planting and harvesting and the cycles of life, and how interesting a woman's cycle is the 28-day cycle of the lunar cycle, and how we look at all the correlations of these puzzle pieces. And so I'm reminded of a story. A little girl was acting out, and her father wanted to give her a task, and so he took what was a map of the United States, and he tore it into shreds, into pieces, small pieces, and he put it in a box and he gave it to his daughter, and he said, "Don't come out of your room until you put this back together again." And 5 minutes later, she came back out, and the whole thing was there all taped together, and she said, "How did you do that?" She said, "Well, Daddy, on the back side of it was a picture of Jesus, and I was able to put together the picture of Jesus." He had torn up the picture of America, but on the back of it was a picture of Jesus. This is what we're doing in the sciences, is we're tearing up the picture of God, but you and I, and people like ourselves and others who are with similar thought life, are able in 5 minutes to put it back together again, because what we see is this magnificent canvas that God has given us to proclaim His glory to the ends of the earth. It doesn't say to the ends of the universe. When we're instructed to share the gospel, it's to the four corners of the earth. It's to the ends of the earth. When we talk about God's commands and instructions, they are confined to the earth. They are not for the cosmos. They are not for life on other planets. They are an assignment for the here and the now, which is extraordinary. We're talking with Paul Gould, co-editor with Daniel Ray and a contributor to this literally beautiful book, The Story of the Cosmos, How the Heavens Declare the Glory of God. Lee Strobel, well known to our audience, best-selling author of The Case for a Creator, says, eloquent, profound, powerful. Here's a beautiful and sweeping affirmation of God's breathtaking creativity. I could not agree more. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to join Paul Gould and talk about his contribution, his particular piece, Rediscovering the Discarded Image. Evidence is pointing to the creation of the cosmos from this incredible book, The Story of the Cosmos. We'll be right back. Not everything that makes the headlines has biblical importance, but many events that happen around the world do, and you never hear about them. Igniting a Nation is pleased to teach Revealing Prophecy every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Marriott 280 in Birmingham. We will cover worldwide events and insider information that will connect the dots of what's happening around the world with biblical prophecy. If you happen to miss a class, we'll televise each week's class at 10 o'clock Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our social media outlets. Copies of the teachings will also be available to purchase on our website at www.ignitinganation.com. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, You'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Paul Gould, co-editor and contributor to this incredible book, The Story of the Cosmos, How the Heavens Declare the Glory of God. Paul, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Paul, there's many articles, many contributed, 13 in all, who each in their own right have established their own credentials, their own expertise, their own identity. But the one I'm talking to now also has his own credentials, has his own identity, and is a direct contributor to this work in your piece on rediscovering the discarded image. Okay. What was your starting premise in establishing that there is such a thing as a discarded image that needs to be rediscovered? Would be the premise of the title. What was the foundation for this, and where did you go to create this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I wrote a book just before this called Cultural Apologetics. I think you mentioned it earlier. And one of the things that I was wrestling with there was the question, how does the gospel get a fair hearing in our culture? Because we live in what I call a disenchanted world. And that's just the idea that we no longer perceive the world in its proper light. And so we don't have eyes to see the giftedness, the sacredness, the beauty, the mystery, the givenness of the world. And so I wrestled with that question in that book. And one of the applications, sort of hopeful that we can join with God to re-enchant the world is what I was talking about in that book. What I said there in that book is part of the way that we can work with God to re-enchant the world is, number one, for us as believers to see and delight in the world the same way Jesus does. And then number two, to invite others to see and delight in the world the way Jesus does. And so that was the impetus in wrestling with this question, because we're all looking at the same thing, yet we have vastly different interpretations of what we are seeing. And the reason why fundamentally are philosophical and imaginative, right? It's not the data. The data can be interpreted based on the worldview, some people like to say, that we hold. And so what I wanted to recapture was the older way of looking at the world, the way that looks at it as gift and created and sacred. So that was the impetus. I wanted to explore some of the philosophical underpinnings of these, what I call the two dominant stories. There's one that's the disenchanted story. I give it a name attached to a philosopher named David Hume. And then there's another one that's it's actually what I call, or what many theologians call, the Great Truth, which was this way of looking at the world that was a synthesis of some Platonic thought and some Aristotelian thought and some Christian thought about the cosmos that pretty much everyone held until about 500 years ago. And so that's what I wanted to do, is recapture that ancient way, which I think is the more appropriate way. It's the way that I think Jesus views the world. And so that's what's going on in that essay.
You know, it's quite interesting as this book is really, it's an artistic, it's a piece of artwork. And we look at the great masters, the Rembrandts, the Picassos, Monets. We look at them, and we find and we examine the similarities. So people who study art can look at strokes or the period that they were in. They can identify it by colors, by the palette, the various ways.
Yeah, style,
all of that. And so to the trained eye, they're able to make those comparisons, see the subtleties, and appreciate that. Okay? To the average person, we're not equipped to do that. We'd recognize the Mona Lisa because the image has been given to us many, 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 many times. We might not recognize Jesus because the artistic image of Jesus is everything from blonde hair and blue eyes to Ethiopian, with no agreement, no consensus of him being somewhat maybe Sephardic looking, maybe just a plain old Middle Eastern looking kind of guy. We don't have any consensus. What's interesting about this book is that it's not that it drove to a consensus, but there is a certain continuity of agreement that transcends probability. 13 points of view independently gathered with a unique assignment and a unique perspective, coming to the same conclusion using 13 different sets of evidence, is unequaled or unparalleled in any other science. It's not in medicine. You can't take 13 different viruses and come up with the same conclusion or the same serum or the same, but this is like doing that. And I was stunned by the thread that sews all of these together with 13, and I know because I heard what it was like for you when you sent this off to the editor and they said, well, you're going to have to cut this, you have to cut this, you have to cut this, and they went through the process of paring this down, but yet they maintained the integrity of this and this common, unique, common thread that was formed with all of it is almost, it's not coincidence, it cannot be coincidence, therefore it's empirical evidence that this must be true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting, many of us are academics who are writing in this book, and so we exist within the university, and historically, the university was, of one truth, uni and veritas, truth. And that was the idea originally of what the university is about. And so classically, when you think of education, you have all the spokes, the disciplines, but they're centered around the center, which is theology. And of course, we've lost the center, and that's why the university is, and that could be a whole other discussion, but it's, it's fragmented, it's hollow, it's fragmented at its core. And so the unity doesn't surprise me, because all of us are under the same conviction, as the great scripture would say in Colossians, that, in Christ all things are, hold together and are united. And so I love how, for example, Clement of Alexander, who was an early father, he said that Um, theology is the queen of the science. It's the hub, the thing that, in philosophy, and which would include the sciences in the old days, was her handmaiden. And so we're just people, men and women, that are exploring the world that God has made, guided by the conviction that there is a meaning behind it all. There's an intelligibility and there's a unity to the world. And so, yeah, no surprise to me, and I think no surprise to the authors, because this is a world that we are plumbing, a world that is true, united, and again points to the beauty and glory and weightiness of the God behind it all.
When you sat down to read the book, and I can so appreciate this because I have several books out there, and when they schedule the first interview, by the time you submit the manuscript to the time it finally is published and you start the media tour, I actually didn't remember what I wrote.
You forgot. Me too. Yeah.
I honestly just, and so, and one of the books was a parable that the Lord had given me, so you would think that this would be indelibly imprinted if you heard from the Lord and it was this clear and it was this clarion call, and you built an entire book around this parable that the Lord gave you. You should certainly have it memorized. And I never did. I had it on a 3x5 index card, and I carried it with me to every single. I said, I can't do it justice I don't want to miss a word, was my excuse. But I just hadn't memorized it.
Yeah.
So when you read it after editing, you now have it in this beautiful form. I think they did an outstanding job with the cover. Yeah. I think they did an outstanding job with the presentation. My hat's off to Harvest House. We work very closely with them. What was your takeaway? What was your takeaway from, first of all, from a reading level? They talk about write a book to the 8th grade. This isn't to the 8th grade reading level. This is above the 8th grade reading level. So what was your takeaway from the presentation, from the cohesiveness? What were some of the surprises for you going back now and reading it again, and are you even more convinced now?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you asked that, because let me two-part answer. There were themes that I noticed this time around, especially when I saw it with all the pictures and read it as a coherent whole. 6 themes, but then I want to tell you the takeaway. But here's the words that kept coming up. 6 words: harmony, all over, music, dance, longing, joy, and beauty. Those were the 6 words that I kept writing, over and over again, that you see with the whole. You see them in individual chapters, but when you take the thing as a whole, this world that God has created fits together, and there's a beauty to it, and a harmony, and it satisfies, and there's a kind of bubbling and music, and there's a joy. And so those are the words. But actually the takeaway was conviction. And the conviction was, so I'm a philosopher, as we mentioned, and so I spend my time with propositions, right? I love to make arguments. I love to examine words. I was even pressing you on a distinction. That's what we do, is we niggle with words and concepts and ideas. And I realized after reading this, last week we were on vacation in northern Wisconsin, and I realized I'm great with ideas, and I can write about them, and I can I can plug in empirical evidence into a premise in an argument to show that God exists. But what I don't do is get my hands dirty. And I was actually convicted, I was talking to my wife, our kids are a little older now, and so it's not as physically intensive. We've got middle school to high school kids. I don't have any hobbies, now their kids are growing up, except for reading and maybe running. And I'm like, I think I need to have hobbies that get me in touch with the world that God has made. And so I actually got an app on my phone, which again is funny because I'm still mediating the world through screen instead of out there, but on astronomy. And so the last 2 weeks, every night about 11 o'clock, I walk outside, and for the first time I'm like, okay, there's Jupiter. Last night I found Saturn, and I'm just sitting and enjoying it. And same thing with birds, and I'm starting to collect rocks, things that they're everywhere, but I never noticed them. And so the conviction, which was kind of surprising, is I tend to keep things at arm's length because we're a philosopher, but I want to look and joy. And if I believe that the heavens are declaring the glory of God and that everything points to God, and if I'm telling people that we need to see and delight in the world the same way Jesus does, and as I read the Gospels, I see, to him, it's a God-bathed and a God-infused world. So I'm trying to get back in touch. That was the takeaway, which was actually kind of a surprise. And it stumbled on. So last thing I'll say on this, last week I was kayaking up in northern Wisconsin, just kind of trying to look at the and the world, the lily and things like that. And I was meditating on Psalm 27, verse 4. Which, of course, David is talking about the temple, and he says, one thing I ask of the Lord, this is what I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple. And so I was thinking about that, and of course we know that David's talking about the temple in Jerusalem there, but theologians also talk about the cosmos as a cosmic temple. And I began to think about that, and the beauty that I was experiencing just in that kayak trip as I was on the lake. And it's like, well, wait a minute. This is the cosmic temple, and there's beauty. And through this beauty, it's leading me to the source of beauty. It gave me a whole different perspective on the world, just actually through thinking about what David was doing in Psalm 27. So anyway, that was the takeaway. It was a personal conviction to get more of my hands into the stuff of creation, which was a surprise.
Which will then draw you closer to the throne of grace. It's
That's right.
Interesting. God did not have to create the cosmos. As a philosopher, there's a one-word question that you live to ask and to answer. And it's the question, why? The philosophers, it's the one word that sums up a philosopher is the word why.
That's right.
Why did God create the cosmos? Why? He could have just created the earth. He didn't have to create the moon. He didn't have to create the stars. He didn't have to create the cosmos. He didn't have to do anything for Genesis day 6, the creation of man. None of those things had to be done. The question is why? And the answer is in the title of your book. And the reason God created the cosmos was to declare the glory of God.
Yeah.
So big, so great, that no matter where we are, you see, we've told people that you're never alone. God's always with you. He's omnipresent. How do I know that? Because I can't go anywhere. I can't look anywhere without seeing his signature, without seeing his unique fingerprint, without his keystrokes, without his brush strokes, without his palette, his season of creation, which he spoke into existence. The majesty and the glory of the Word of God that spoke the world and the cosmos into existence is the very Word given to us, and we have access to that. That to me boggles my mind, that the one who breathed the cosmos into existence breathed life into me and gave me the opportunity to know his Word. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I want to again compliment you and Daniel on an extraordinary job of compiling this and of your contributions to a book called The Story of the Cosmos, How the Heavens Declare the Glory of God. If you've been wrestling with this scientific concept of UFOs and other life and have to find some kind of tangible explanation, there's no more tangible an explanation than looking up and seeing what God has created, the creative power of God. You need no more than that. But these essays are something that will change your life, and I encourage you to step up from the milk that you might be drinking and some of the things you've been reading and take the time to embrace something that will challenge your mind, expand your horizons, and even an author himself has says, I now need to get my hands dirty because I want to get closer to what I stand in awe of. And you too will stand in awe of the glory of God as you embrace this new book, The Story of the Cosmos, How the Heavens Declare the Glory of God. Paul Gould, thank you. Thank you for sharing this incredible work with us here on Revealing the Truth.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the time.
God bless. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.